In any team, or indeed in any relationship, the size of the gap between expectation and reality will determine the level of disappointment, frustration, and unproductive conflict on the team. In my experience working with leaders, teams, and helping develop healthy workplace cultures, I have found that the smaller the gap between expectation and reality, the lower the levels of disappointment, frustration, and unproductive conflict. I have also found that the smaller the gap, the greater the results that the team can achieve, and the quicker the team can achieve those results. This is the hallmark of a cohesive and high-performing team. Now, as a leader, there is a lot you can do to close the gap between expectation and reality. And it begins with setting valid expectations only. In this video, I'd like to share the 4 requirements for an expectation to be valid. The first requirement for an expectation to be valid is that you have to be conscious of it. In other words, you have to be aware of your expectation. Sometimes we're not even conscious of our own expectations, not least until we become disappointed. I'll give you an example. A few years ago, I engaged the services of someone to help me on a project. It was a very frustrating experience. The outcome was good, but the journey was very frustrating. It was only afterwards that I realized that I had the unconscious expectation that that person would respond to my email even if it didn't require an answer, just simply to acknowledge it. That was an unconscious expectation. The second requirement for an expectation to be valid is that it has to be credible. In other words, it has to be realistic. It has to be relevant. For an expectation to be valid, it has to be something you can credibly expect from someone. One way or one question I ask myself when setting expectations to determine whether they're credible or not is by asking, would I be prepared to do this myself? The third requirement for an expectation to be valid is that it has to be communicated clearly. Now, that may seem obvious to you, but I have coached many leaders on this one. Do not assume that people know what you expect from them. What might be obvious to you is not so obvious to someone else. There's that old saying that says, common sense is not that common after all. It is unfair to expect something from someone without even communicating it to them, without them even being aware that you even have that expectation in the first place. Communicate it clearly, communicate it consistently. The last requirement for an expectation to be valid is that it has to be confirmed. In other words, it has to be agreed. Has that person confirmed that they are willing and that they are able to meet your expectation? And follow up verbal confirmation with written confirmation. That is good practice. Do not assume that silence means consensus. It has to be confirmed. All 4 of these requirements have to be present for an expectation to be valid and to avoid any doubt and misunderstanding. They have to be conscious, they have to be credible, they have to be communicated clearly, and they have to be confirmed. Just think about the time you could save just by practicing these 4 C's and closing the gap between expectation and reality.